Good evening, everyone. One moment. I have myself logged in on Zoom so I can read your questions. Now, apologies. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome on behalf of Sligo Libraries and the IT Sligo BA in Writing and Literature. We are here tonight for The Word, and it's a very special edition where we are celebrating Una Mannion and her new book, Crooked Tree, which was published in January just gone by Faber and Faber. So I won't do a full introduction of Una because we're delighted to be joined by Lauren Baker and David North, two of Una's students from the BA in Writing and Literature in IT Sligo. So they will be interviewing. And we're also joined by Irene Hennessy for music. And having heard some of the clips when we were rehearsing before, you're in for a real treat. So I also wanted to say I'm delighted to be the one that's welcoming everybody this evening because, of course, Una was one of the people who originally helped to create The Word. So it's just so nice to be here to celebrate this book with her now. Okay, so if everybody can keep their mics on mute, and you can use the chat function throughout the evening as well to message us with any questions for Una, and I'll read those a little bit later. And if you're taking part in the open mic, and we do have a few people, if you have your mics and your cameras ready to go towards the end of the evening, we'll come to you then. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Lauren and David, and I wish you a very lovely evening. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to April's edition of The Word. So tonight, Lauren and I have the great pleasure of interviewing Una Mannion, who some of you might recognise from the corridors and Zoom screens of Sligo IT, where she is the chair for the Writing and Literature programme. Una was born in Philadelphia and has been resident in Sligo for 30 years. She is a Hennessy Award-winning poet and edits the Cormorant literary magazine along with Louise Kennedy and Eoin McNamee. Her novel, Crooked Tree, has been published in Ireland and the UK with Faber and Faber, and in the United States with HarperCollins. Of A Crooked Tree, The Guardian says, "Where Mannion excels is in evoking a time and a place that's slipping away, even as she pins it to the page with such perspective lyrical economy." Lucy Caldwell says, "Una Mannion's A Crooked Tree is an assured and atmospheric debut, immaculately plotted, with a sense of danger seeping from every shadow." Elizabeth Wetmore describes the book as beautifully written with tenderness and wisdom. And Eoin McNamee says, "Una Mannion beautifully chronicles what we lose in the badlands of family. Our fathers are ghosts. Our mothers cannot bear the weight of our love. Adolescence is lost in betrayal and misplaced desire." We're going to be hearing Una read some excerpts from A Crooked Tree this evening, and that'll be followed by a discussion with Lauren, Una, and myself, of course, and then there'll be a Q&A later. So if any of you have got questions, and I'm sure you all have, then start writing them down in the old chat box, and we might allow you to get round to them. Over to you, Lauren.
Thank you. So yeah, we are being treated this evening to a performance as well from the musician Irene Hennessy. So she is a graduate of BIM in Dublin in 2018 and a native of Sui in Sligo. Una and Irene collaborated to choose tonight's music to complement the excerpts being read. Irene has played with bands around Sligo and around Ireland, so tonight she is accompanied on guitar by Una's husband, Michael Holmes. They are going to start the evening off with Fleetwood Mac's Landslide. So that's, take it away. Beautiful.
Lovely.
Amazing.
Thank you, Irene and Michael. So,
Gorgeous.
interview time. Okay, Una. So, we're going to start off with a couple of nice.
We're actually going to be hearing
from
Una to read.
I'm so excited. Sorry.
If you're ready, Una, go for it.
Thank you, everyone, so much. And to Irene and Michael, that was just absolutely beautiful. Thank you. As Lou said, I was involved in starting the word, and it really, really is such an honor to be a guest, finally. And I'm like it was of all the readings or whatever I've done, this has meant so much to me. So thank you so much for inviting me. And I wanted to particularly thank Alice Lyons and Michelle Brennan, who have been collaborating and curating the word this past year, for the invitation. And to also thank Patricia Keane and Lou McGrath and everyone at Sligo Central Library for having me. So I'm going to read a few excerpts from A Crooked Tree, and I'm going to read just really small segments. And so I'm going to read the very first part that I'm going to read is from the very beginning, and it's sort of the catalyst moment. It sets off the events, I suppose, of the novel. A mother of 5 children is driving home. It's the last day of school. She's a single mother. The father has died before the events of the book begin, and she's frustrated, and the kids are squabbling in the back, and she makes a decision. The car skidded into the shoulder, right where 252 crossed the turnpike. Out, get out. My mom said it with her voice low, which let us know she meant it. Ellen reached across Thomas, opened the back door, and started to climb out. You can't leave her here, Marie said. It's getting dark. I'm going with her. She started to gather her school bag from the floor of the front. You'll do no such thing. Wait, said Thomas. He looked stricken, blaming himself for the teasing. Ellen was standing on the gravel verge of the overpass in her school pinafore, tennis shirt, and knee socks. Marie was opening her door when my mother threw the car into gear and accelerated forward. I looked back. Ellen was facing away from us, looking down over the bridge where columns of cars funneled along the turnpike. Mom, don't, please, Thomas said, but she didn't answer. We sped up 252 into the national park and then turned west toward Valley Forge Mountain. Ahead of us, the sun had fallen below the fields. You can't leave her, it's dark, Marie said. We were still 5 or 6 miles from home. I hadn't said anything to make my mother stop. We careened down the road, went through the covered bridge past farmland and fences. Beside us, the shadows of dogwoods blurred in the dark as my mother kept driving, each tree hemmed in a halo of white where the bracts had fallen. And so they leave the child on the road, and the kids, looking back at their sister, sense that maybe something terrible will happen, and it does, and that's, I guess, the sets things in motion for the rest of the book. I'm going to read another very small excerpt from later. The mother has a secret boyfriend, and the kids have never ever met him, and they're always trying to sort of figure out who he is, or would they know him, and they suspect that he might be their youngest sister's father. I can't remember when I first knew Bill existed. He didn't, and then he did. He was silent breathing on the phone, a pause, and then a voice that I knew but didn't know. Is your mother there? Mom never denied his existence, or that he might be Beatrice's father. It must have been Marie and Thomas who explained it to me. I don't remember. I knew not to say anything to anyone, even though I have no memory of anyone ever ordering this. At home, we'd made fun of Bill in front of my father. We guessed all sorts of occupations for him: trucker, plumber, milkman, traveling salesman who sold everything from Bibles to steak knives. We'd take out Thomas's walkie-talkies and perform Bill plays when my mother was nearby. Breaker 10-4, this is Fat Man Bill. Can you read my handle? I'm so doggone lazy, I just can't get out of my truck and go see my daughter. Roger, Fat Man Bill, you sure are ugly. I hear you're no good father, too. We'd used hillbilly accents. Beatrice would watch and laugh with us as if she didn't realize it was her dad we were joking about. When we drove past storefronts with a neon bill blinking in the dark, we'd shout, is that him? Is that Bill? It could be Bill's Carpets, Uncle Bill's Pancake House, or Whiskey Bill's Bar and Grill. Once we passed a billboard that read, Bill Bowie for Sheriff. We asked our mother, is that him? Is Bill running for sheriff? She didn't say anything, and we took her silence as a sign. We started a campaign for his opponent, making posters and slogans for him and marching outside her bedroom door, cheering on the other guy for sheriff. Beatrice did it with us. She didn't know if the Bill she knew was running for sheriff, but she didn't want him to win either. Just a little bit later in the book, this is just a moment where the narrator, Libby, I should mention, the book is narrated by a 15-year-old girl, and it's her younger sister who's put out of the car. And she has a moment where she remembers landscaping with her father, because her father cut grass for a living, and the kids used to go with him before he died to do it, and she's just having a memory about it. So if I could find, I seem to have marked the page and then marked the wrong page. Sorry, I'm going to start that again. I remembered a day at the cat lady's when we were working with my dad. She lived alone in an old Victorian-style house with at least 40 cats. My dad had looked after her garden for over 15 years, since before I was born. She'd been trying to sell the house for a long time, and a few summers ago it had finally sold, even with all the cats hanging around, lying on counters and sitting in sinks. When she was moving, she hired my father to do some work inside, pulling up carpets and taking old furniture to the dump. Marie, Thomas, and I all went to help with the job. It was late July and hot, well into the 90s. We'd peeked through her windows before to look at the cats, but had never been inside. The heat and stench were stifling. The ammonia from the cat pee burned our eyes. We choked and air squeezed out of my lungs. It was a 3-story house and the cats had been everywhere. To make it worse, she had turned off the air conditioning. The mean bitch, Marie said. We started on the 3rd floor where it was hottest and tried to pull out the small carpet nails at the edges. Dad told us to go back to the truck and get gloves. The fumes were in my mouth and throat. When we rolled up the first carpet, which was damp, the floorboards were rotten underneath. Get out of the house and wash your hands and faces at the outside spigot. Get the soap in the truck, Dad told us. Thomas, you stay with me. He said that the odor would never come out. The new owners would have to take up the floorboards. Marie and I sat outside for hours, saying very little, while Dad and Thomas finished the work alone, carrying rolled up rotten carpets and heaving them into the back of the truck. Thomas worked intently, staggering under the weight and smell, never wanting to let my father down. He was 14. I sat on the curb with Marie and looked over at the garden that my father had planted for the cat lady years earlier. That year's tomatoes were ripe and red on their vines against her deck. Dad had canes supporting them with soft string, so as not to damage the tender stalks. The cat lady had a Venus de Milo statue in the garden, a naked woman about as high as my hip with missing arms. Marie walked over and kicked her to the ground and came back and sat next to me on the curb. Her face was dirty and streaked. Fucking people think they know something about culture, she said. So I'm just going to read from a point later, 2 points much later in the book, but they're not spoilers. They just I think scene set a little bit. So later in the book, the narrator Libby goes on a motorcycle ride into further west in Pennsylvania, into mining country. And I suppose one of the things about her is that her father had given her a book about trees before he died, and she's really interested in trees or dendrology, and she's sort of always cataloging trees. And she's brought to this place by a guy in her neighborhood who's 20 and on a motorcycle. After Reading, we passed Minersville. I knew already we were in mining country. Everything looked like it had slumped slightly. Even the sky sagged as we passed coal trucks and anthracite signs and lots of American flags. A few miles beyond Buck Run, Wilson turned off the main road. We went down 2 smaller roads and onto a dirt path that sent up white dust all around us like ash. The path ended at a chain-link gate and a sign that read no trespassing, and another that read blasting area. Other vehicles had driven right over the fence just to the left of the gate. A whole section lay flattened on the ground. Wilson drove over it. We'd come through a tunnel of trees, but in front and all around of us now was nothing. No vegetation, no trees, no colour. Wilson kept on driving forward, but the landscape was completely bare. We climbed a hill, but the further up we went, the more the traction under the wheels seemed to give, and it started to feel as if we were sinking. Wilson stopped and we both stepped off the bike. The earth beneath my feet moved as if there was nothing substantial below us, and I sank several inches in my wellies. What's wrong with the ground? What is this? I thought maybe it was a quarry. It's a strip mine. What is it? They blast away the earth to get to the coal instead of digging for it. It's like tearing up the skin, the fat, and the muscle of the earth to get to the bone. Sometimes they take off the whole mountain tops, explode them off so they can get directly to the coal seam. 600 feet of mountain or more, and then they dump it all. There must have been thousands of acres here, all stripped bare like a scar. Nothing would ever grow here again. It would be dead forever. Far away, I could see forests, a blue-green mirage moving like a sea of water. But here, the earth was all the same pale brown. There was no sound, no birds, no movement of water, nothing. We walked up to the highest point on the empty hill and sat on the strange surface. I felt as if it might swallow me into its nothingness. This is what the earth without trees would feel like. No texture, no substructure, no roots or connections to give it composition, no history, just a sense of collapsing. I'd never been to a place so bleak. And finally, I'm just going to finish with a piece from the very end of the book. That summer, when I so desperately tried to reel us all in, I didn't understand the forces spinning us apart. I didn't know it was my last summer on the mountain, that I wouldn't live with my mother or my siblings again. Even without knowing all that was to come, I already wanted to go back to before, to hold us all together in the car driving through Pennsylvania Dutch, so squished and inseparable, I couldn't tell where my skin ended and my sister's began. I wanted to be in the back of Dad's pickup truck, us and the machines after a day of cutting lawns, driving home and the air cooling us as we drove, grass blades and leaves in a swirl around us, or lying on the living room floor in our separate spaces, listening to old reel-to-reel tapes of a time when we were looking forward to who we would be in the future. I wanted to hold us there, together. Summer evenings in the driveway, playing kick the can against the dark, calling from azaleas and dogwoods, running the trails. I wanted to be on the moss hill in the kingdom, smoking Charlotte's Kents with sage, or looking up through a canopy of maple in October, wearing a sweater, wading through leaf fall. I wanted Beatrice in my bed, curling my hair, needing something from me. Ellen coiled beside us, wound against the world. I wanted Marie back across the room from me, making sense of it all, and Thomas in his room looking up at the spinning universe. Even now, sometimes I want to be driving down 252, and Ellen's tired head falls on my shoulder, and I don't shrug it off, and she stays there with us in the car, to drive again, all of us together, through the covered bridge, to feel the wooden planks beneath our wheels, to climb the mountain, knowing the turns by heart by the feel of them, to be going home. So thank you everyone for listening. So I wanted to just say something about Irene Hennessy, who's singing this evening, and I suppose chose with me songs that I love, and I suppose that I thought related to the book. And anyone who's read the book will know that there's a thread of the Rolling Stones all the way through, because Libby, the narrator, she and her best friend have a kind of a game about naming Rolling Stones lyrics. And so Irene is going to do, the next song that she's going to do is Ruby Tuesday. But I just wanted to say that she's a Sligo singer, and she's my neighbor out in Suey. And her, all the while that she was growing up, I suppose I've seen her in the primary school plays and the Suey choir. And when she was in secondary school, I would go see her she played in the Royal Theatre in Castlebar and the Hawkswell and in competitions. And so I suppose I've heard her singing. But my kids her mother was my children's childminder, so my kids grew up in her house, and so it's just really an honor to have her here tonight singing, and I just want to really thank her and all the Hennessys. So they're going to sing Ruby Tuesday now.
While the sun is bright, or in the darkest night, no one knows. She comes and she goes. Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Who could hang a name on you when you change with every new day? Still, I'm gonna miss you. Don't question why she needs to be so free. She'll tell you it's the only way to be. She just can't be chained to a life where nothing's gained, nothing's lost. It's such a cost. Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Who could hang a name on you when you change with every new day? Still, I'm gonna miss you. There's no time to lose, I heard her say. Catch your dreams before they slip away. Dying all the time. Lose your dreams and you lose your mind. Life unkind. Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Who could hang a name on you when you change with every new day? Still, I'm gonna miss you. Yeah. Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Who could hang a name on you when you change with every new day? Still, I'm gonna miss you.
Brilliant. I'm bopping away here in my room. It's like going out for a live gig for the first time in ages.
Sorry, folks, my screen froze completely.
You're still there, David. We can see
Oh,
you.
Thank
That
you.
was amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you
sorry
so
if I was
much for the
looking.
reading. Oh,
Right.
gorgeous.
Yes. Thank you, Una. So we will start now,
Right,
will we?
are we
And
gonna
David will get it
Yeah, I
right.
think we should get.
Thank you. Okay, Una. Okay, so my first question to you, Una, is was your book a slow burn that took years to develop, or did you wake up one morning and it was all there in your head and you had to, rush over to the keyboard and get it all written down before you forgot it?
Yeah, I would say that it was more of a slow burn because I suppose I was working on it for a few years, and I suppose I had some of the ideas for quite a long time. I think when I wrote in very quick bursts, and intensely, but it was not something that happened like eureka, and there was a lot of hair pulling and anxiety and facing the abyss of, I'm not someone who plots ahead. So when I was writing sort of scene to scene rather than having a sense of what the whole plot would be. But I did have the first image of the child being put out of the car on the road, and for whatever reason, I had the final image, and it's not a spoiler, of the narrator trying to cut the grass with scissors in the dark. There was something about that thought of that and the futility of it, and yet the effort, the human effort to try and control something or put order on something that you can't. So I had if that's walking that tightrope from point A to B, it was everything in between I didn't know.
Thank you.
Good. That kind of leads us on. That was kind of onto the next one. We were discussing how you completely drew us in on that first line. Like we've been chatting away about this book between David and I, and yeah, the first line, first paragraph, first page just draws you straight in. And wondering how much attention you gave to that. Did that take you a while to get it all just so? Because it worked.
It's fun. I always think it's interesting about like where you're going to begin or where you start. And I guess like when I'm talking to other people about writing or encouraging other people, I'm always like, just start. And the beginning might be something that happens way later where you end up beginning might be something that you've written like 2,000 words in or 20,000 words in. You can worry about that later, but just begin. But I did begin with that moment, driving north up 252. And the only thing I changed was that clause at the very start, the night we left Ellen on the road, was not in what I had originally, it's not how I originally started it. The tweaking that happened in that first paragraph actually had a lot to do with the position of people in the car, because I knew it was in America, but I still had the driver on the wrong side. I was still in an Irish car, even though I had them driving on the right side. So this is where like the copy editors are brilliant, and there was a lot of like, let's get this right. How can she be looking this direction, or so. But for me, that the first paragraph, and I suppose the inciting moment or whatever was how I began.
Brilliant. Led you on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Una. Right, I'd like to ask you now. This is something that really piqued my interest. Okay, so many reviewers have remarked that your book is a classic coming-of-age novel, but I personally believe that you have written a beautiful book addressing identity, the identity that people choose for themselves, identity that is forced upon someone, whether they like it or not, the destruction of a person's identity. And in the case of many adults, especially those in your book, the loss of identity, they find themselves in limbo, wondering who they are or what they're supposed to be at that particular stage in their life. Did you deliberately set down to write a great novel about identity? Would you like to expand on that, please?
No, I didn't, but I think it is. I really love that you said that, and thank you because I really like that way of looking at the book. I think this book is a lot about identity, and I suppose that what immediately comes to mind is the father's identity, because he has emigrated from his home, and he's an immigrant, and I suppose we have a kind of narrative about the immigrant experience, but for him, he's someone who never quite got over the loss of home, and he finds himself in America but not quite doing the American dream or the thing, assimilating completely. And so there's a kind of loss that he has that the children witness, and I think they carry to a certain extent. I think the identity also is very much, the kids are living in a place where they feel that their family are different, and so that they don't quite belong, and they're not sure what they are, so they don't really belong in their neighborhood. They're a divorced family, and that, in the early 80s, that was uncommon. There's a little bit of a class difference between them and the people around them, and so there's a kind of sense of not quite fitting in, and anxiety about identity in that respect. I do think that we see maybe the siblings like trying to have an identity, trying like pursuing things maybe to try and be something, or so the eldest sister's into punk rock, or the next brother's really into like planets, and he's fixed on the solar system. But I also I think in the wider context, like there's characters like Wilson, who is a really damaged person who doesn't belong really in any group, and he's carrying the baggage that people have about him because he's had a bit of a breakdown that was very public. He's been a vandal. He's done some stuff, and in a weird way, he is struggling so hard to belong or to be needed that he takes on this fatherless family and tries to help them, and probably puts them in more danger. But he also is trying to find an identity, I think, through vicariously through them.
Could I just point out a moment in the book I really want to specify that about? I thought was just it really struck me, and we have discussed it. It's without giving too much away about the story, we come across the local doctor who features quite prominently in the book. We come across him, and he's had a car accident. I'm not going to give too much away, but he is the cause of the accident, and that scene in the book takes place over 3 pages, 6 sides, that entire scene, and there's a real focus on that scene, and I was really struck. The poignancy, the tenderness of the scene. You can just see the doctor, he's standing there, and he's told himself this story all his life. He has his identity, that who he is, and you can just kind of, the way you've written it, you can see this man, his whole persona is being shattered as he stands there surveying what's before him. And I just think that captured the real spirit of the entire book. I'm not even sure why yet. I'm still studying it. But I'd just like to thank you for that scene. And I just wanted to point it out to everyone. Read the book for that scene, because for me, that was just a special moment.
And it's such a brief moment as well. It's something, it just shows how fragile you build up these identities, and you build up your whole world around believing you are this person and projecting it to everyone else, and it's shattered in one moment. It's just it's not even the most tragic car accident. It is it's a little thing, really, and it's not that little, but and it's just, that's it, completely shatters. So yeah.
I mean, I think that the doctor in question has like, and I guess I don't want to give a spoiler either, but I suppose he's done damage elsewhere, and so then in that scene, he damages something else, and it is a living creature that he's hurt. But I suppose metaphorically, maybe there's a sense, because he seems to fall apart a little bit, and he's the doctor and the person who's supposed to be able to act, and he's completely unable to act, and the narrator has more sense of purpose. She comes upon the accident, and she's able to sort of act in a way that the doctor just can't. So yeah, and I do think that he's lost his sense of himself as well.
That's something else we were saying, that the narrator, Libby, she's one of the ones who seems to avoid identity at all costs. She tries so hard not to be defined at any point, but you make that apparent all the way through. There's actually, kind of leads on to what I was going to talk about. She almost is using the trees to protect her from having any identity whatsoever. She sort of hides behind them, and obviously it builds up throughout the book. But yeah, that was something I wanted to just. I'm glad that you read that. That last chapter is my favourite. The strip mine, or not last, but near the end. It's amazing. It's completely different pace throughout. But yeah, that whole idea of the devastation caused by man on the planet sort of runs through you're very explicit on the pro-environment message throughout the book, which I really enjoyed. And the whole idea of their absent father who has his hands deep in the earth. He sort of personifies the environment throughout, and I really enjoy that because we've been doing a little bit of that, sort of the idea of the medieval Irish poets revering nature, bringing it into their work rather than just talking about it. And it seems like you've done that all the way through this. The environment's almost a character throughout. It's omnipresent. It's everywhere you look, even though you're sort of talking about a suburban town, but everywhere there's trees, there's copperheads, there's the bracts lying in the driveway. Get a great detail given to them. It's almost like they're having a little cameo. And I loved that, how you did that all the way through. Yeah. So I was just wondering if it's something that you are passionate about, or if it was a intention to make it such a dominant part of the book.
Yeah, I think there's like two things there, and one is what you said about the father, and like the father's connection to nature, and how the narrator sort of feels connected to him through that. And then there's the other thing, which is just about I suppose the environment and what's being eroded, and sense of place. And I think I made the decision initially. It was going to be kind of a placeless, world, in that it could be anywhere. And I made the decision then to set it in a specific place that I knew. And I think part of that had to do with in the early 1980s, and I'm sure everyone experienced this everywhere, that there was suddenly you had these like housing developments, like I guess in Ireland they're called estates, but in America they were called developments. And this was like they were, where you had these like cookie cutter houses, and I'm sure it started before that, but where Valley Forge Mountain is, it was just around that time there was a nuclear power plant being built at the foot of the mountain, and that you could just see the cooling towers rise, as they built them. When Libby looks west, she sees farmland, and when she looks east, it's all industrialized. So I think there was something about the particular place and the fact that there was this incredible nature all around them, and because they grew up next to a national park that was a preserve, and they had this forest and could run wild in the woods, and that was their playground. And I suppose in Pennsylvania, the summer of 1981, I don't know if there's this place in the middle of the state called Centralia, Pennsylvania, that's been on fire. Like it's been on fire underground since the 1960s, but in the 1980s, it kind of erupted. The town and all the surrounding areas have had to be evacuated because of the, I suppose there's just the fumes that are coming from the fire. So in the summer of 1981, where my book is set, there was a boy in Centralia, Pennsylvania, who actually fell through like a sinkhole that happened because of the fires, and he actually grabbed a tree root is what saved him. He grabbed a tree root, and his cousin pulled him out. But since then, the whole town has been evacuated. But it's just kind of, when you were young and you hear these stories, and you just think like, what we've done, to the earth, that there's still a fire in 2021, and that there's a hole in the center of the state. There's this place where no one can live. And when I was 15, I went to a strip mine. It actually was in Tennessee, and the earth was exactly like I've just described, that complete absence of any kind of structure. It was so desolate. And then, so I do think for me, the environmental thing was there, because the narrator is very interested in the woods and the trees and knowing nature. And she sees a kind of threat, not only to that, but to her family and to everything. So there's, this whole kind of anxiety that she has. And because her father was someone who loved nature and gave them a sense of place by connecting them to nature. And I was just thinking, I had initially thought about keeping things placeless, but if you think about all the things that that were brought to us in that time, like strip malls or super malls, the King of Prussia Mall that she goes to, and that Sage works in, at the time in 1981 became the biggest shopping mall in the world for a very brief period of time, and like all the highways and flyovers, and where a place becomes any place, and it's a non-place, it could be anywhere. And so I loved just even being able to name Conshohocken, Phoenixville, King of Prussia, Valley Forge, and all these places with this history and this resonance, and that people had walked there before them, and having a sense of that.
Yeah, I found that really touching. There's the trail running through the woods that she runs down, and she says it was probably a Native American trail before that. You just think that's ancient, like these tiny pathways running through these forests.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So, you're something of a botanist, Una, is that right?
Sorry?
So you're something of a botanist.
No.
No?
Detail. No, really?
I have to.
Yeah, we thought you must be tree obsessive.
I did a lot of research on trees to write the book, and at the start, and just maybe this is like I suppose something that happens. If anyone's ever read Annie Proulx's The Shipping News, at the start of each chapter she has a knot, and so each chapter begins with a picture of a knot and a little description of it. And I had initially done 28 chapters with each chapter beginning with a tree and a description of that tree. And when I first sent it to my agent, he was like, it sort of disrupts, I'm not sure. And some of them I wasn't so sure about myself. I thought they sounded a little bit airy-fairy sometimes, like Tree of Life, maybe too, just like that it would pull you out of the narrative too much. So I slipped them in, because I'd done all this. I'd gotten, the National Park Service has a registry of all the trees in Valley Forge, and I would have been very familiar with a lot of the trees already. But I looked up all of the trees and looked at the folklore and the medicinal uses and the dendrology. I did all of it, and then chose 28, and then they were all cut. It was like, I don't know, at least probably several weeks of work. But and I think that's what you have to be prepared for, is that if a few editors are saying it's not needed, then I agreed.
You'll have to write another book. Do a little side. You can make a little slip book. Trees of Pennsylvania by Una Mannion.
So we still have time for more, don't we? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'll go next then. This is the question that have teenagers everywhere falling off their chairs laughing, I expect. So it struck me, Una, upon the second reading of the book, I thought what you've created is an instruction manual for adults on remembering what it's like to be a teenager. Because, seriously, when I first read the book and the first few chapters, I was really questioning Libby's actions. The teenager through whose eyes the story is told. I was watching this person and thinking, why don't you just call the cops or tell your mum? Tell an adult. And but by the time I was a few chapters in, I realized that's not what you do. You had me convinced. You reminded me what it is like to be an adolescent, especially perhaps in the 1980s, more so how you can feel powerless, untrusting, and even in fear of the world of the adult, which seems to be, to many teenagers, were either away with the fairies or just too darn scary. You know what I mean? So is that something that I think that's what I think makes your book so compelling to read. It's so realistic, and I dread to think if there's any teenagers watching, if they agree with me. But do you think that there's
I ordered my teenagers to watch it. I don't know if they are, but they'll think it's hilarious that you think that I wrote a manual that instructs adults on what it feels like to be a teenager. I think we probably all remember what it's like to be a teenager to a certain extent, and like maybe we all still carry some of that, anxiety and not being that comfortable in your own skin. But I think in this in the novel, that what you're talking about, like why they don't go to adults, is I think that's pretty common. That there's a code of honor or something with children, and they don't they don't tell the adults in this situation, partly because they think that they're going to get in trouble, but I think also because they think their mother is going to get in trouble, and they're afraid of that also. And so in a funny way, they're children and they're not doing the right thing, but part of it is because they're trying to shoulder the responsibility of the adults in their world that have failed them. And I think over and over again, what happens in this book is that the adults do fail children, emotionally and in other ways. And so I think the siblings trust each other, they trust their friends, and they kind of think that they can maybe take something in hand or take responsibility for something. I think the whole thing of trying to be in a teenage psyche, I initially started in third person. I was using the she, and the more I was about 30,000 words in when I made the decision to try I instead, which was hard, but I was finding it hard to actually get close. I was sort of talking about her from a too far a distance, and doing that third person close, I think, is a real craft. Louise Kennedy launched her book here recently, and I think so many of her stories are third person close, and they're so good. That you feel like you're inside someone's head, but it's always the story's being told from the outside and through objects, and so I mean, thank you, David, for thinking it seems authentic. But the other thing I just wanted to say, you mentioned about the time, and the time was different. Like, I do think that we had a lot more freedom in the 80s and the 70s and 80s than kids have now, and a freedom to wander into danger and to experience that kids now don't have as much. And I know they're probably watching, but my kids got me to watch Stranger Things, and like they never questioned the upside down or anything like that. What they thought was not believable is where are the parents. So like that word, they could believe the world except for that part. Like, where were the parents? And I think that was set in 1983.
Yeah, they just run wild. It's like, at no point do they. I think they just sort of have dinner with them,
Yeah.
maybe once or twice, and the rest of the time they're just off doing their own thing, like Neverland or something.
It was
Can't
real.
imagine that.
It was like that. No one knew where you were till you came, till you were
Question
there.
there for how autobiographical this book. How much of you are you in there in Libby, or did you see yourself more as a Marie? Are you a goth?
No, I'd love to be Marie. I think there's probably a part of me in a lot of the characters. I wouldn't say just one. And what, like, I think everyone draws on things they know when they're writing. We draw on, like, I drew on a place. My own father was an Irish immigrant, and I definitely drew on my experience of him and what that was like for him and leaving Ireland. But it's fiction,
Yeah.
and I suppose if I've drawn on characters and used them symbolic, if I've drawn on people I've met or used, they've been used symbolically, not, I'm not trying to write a memoir or, but I suppose there's things that, things I know, like I worked in Chick-fil-A in the King Prussia Mall. I think I have Marie working in Chick-fil-A, but I did that penance, and so there's smelling like chicken and all of that. So there's things I drew on because I knew them or knew something about that experience, but it's a fictional tale.
Yeah, I love the little detail. I think that's my favorite of the Wellingtons, the Irish Wellingtons, that people in America just didn't know what they were. It's like,
but they would now, because it's become like such a fashion statement or whatever. But yeah, in the 70s and 80s, people didn't know what are those weird rubber boots that you have on. and they didn't come in cool colors. We just had black.
And I loved your bad guy is just such a super bad guy. He's just so menacing. We'll call him Barbie Man because that's what they call him in the book, the nickname they give him. And I love his kind of shocking image, his long blonde hair, his white blonde hair that goes down past his backside, and his blonde eyebrows, just the image you give him. And he's such a great bad guy. And he did I've told you this already, so hopefully you won't fall off your chair again, but it reminded me of it reminded me of the white whale in Moby Dick. There, I've said it, because the way the whole book revolves around this bad dude, and but he's just in and out. He's just under the surface, Now and again he surfaces, and everyone goes to battle stations, and he causes panic, and then there he goes under the surface again. And without giving too much of the story away, it was just he also reminded me of the whale in Moby Dick as well, because he's injured and he's pissed off and he's looking for revenge. So I just thought, just to let you know, you do a good bad guy.
Well, I think, I mean, in some ways he almost could dip into caricature, and I was a little worried about that, but because he really is more of just a specter, a ghost almost that hangs over the book, and the children are terrified about because he has done something bad to them and to their sister. But yeah, we don't really, he's never fully developed, and I suppose when I did something about the writing process, I suppose I probably wrote him in much more in the subsequent drafts. And when Faber bought it, one of the things the editor said was she felt that the threat of him needed to be more consistently through the book. And so I probably added some things to ratchet up, to kind of just keep the pace going, because the book is quiet in a lot of ways and reflective and looking back. and so I suppose the forward momentum came from Barbie Man a little bit. And yeah, he was, my sister had an encounter when she was young with someone like him. And I always remember saying that his hair was like a doll's. And it was such I just remembered that forever. It's such a creepy, for a child to say this person, and that the hair was perfect like a doll's. So
yeah, definitely kept the pace up. He was a threat, but he was like, I love that. Like Libby, she always just seemed to. She's like, I know what's going to happen with Barbie Man. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, Libby. Like, what is going to happen? You're always wondering what she's going to do next. But yeah, definitely won't spoil anything because it's all good there. I was going to ask you actually. So you're talking about the writing process, and you say in your acknowledgements, thank you so much to the River Mill in County Down. So you obviously went away for a bit of a retreat to get some of this down. Was that like most of it done in County Down, or was it all set out? And yeah.
I did a lot of it in the River Mill. So I think before that, and I've probably talked about this elsewhere, but I was someone who was like just writing whenever I could, when I could get time. So like my kids used to swim, and I'd be on the bank, that's at the side of the pool in those bleachers, with my laptop typing. I'd go to collect them early, at discos. I'd be sitting in the car outside a few hours early, with self-enforced lock-in, typing. But I've never been someone who's been particularly good at arriving at the desk every day, and having that kind of discipline, which I think is really important. But my life hasn't really allowed it. And I think when I'm teaching, just having the mental energy to get up at 5 and do that, and then teach all day when I'm not really feeling like I'm ready for the lectures or whatever it is, I found really hard. And so the writing retreats, the very first one I did was at the River Mill, and I think almost out of like superstition or something, I just kept going back there because I got so much work done, and I was like afraid to go anywhere else. So while writing this book, I think I did 4 I went to the River Mill 4 times. And for me, that immersive, like complete, where you're totally and utterly immersed in the book, and it's all you're thinking about, and you fall asleep and you're dreaming about it. And even if you go for a walk or a run, it's all you're thinking about. And for me, that total time inside the book was so valuable. And I got a lot of first words down, and I think that's the hard part anyway. The editing and the crafting is the real writing, but like I think getting stuff down first, and I did a lot of it. I did a lot of it there, and I sort of am learning a little bit about how I can work, and so those intense spurts for me are really important. Even if I'm arriving at the desk every day, I still need that burst of just totally in it.
Brilliant, yeah. Precious moments.
And
get them.
will we see any more of Libby and Wilson McVeigh and co?
I don't think so.
No.
I guess one of the things that happens is you get so I'm writing another book, and so I just feel very, very. My head is inside a different story at the moment, and it's completely different. And I can't really. It's hard for me to imagine going back to that story or trying to write like a sequel or a prequel or anything like that. So not anytime soon. And I think for the next year, my head is. I'm in a manuscript at the moment, and my head is very much there.
I'd be happy to take on Wilson McVeigh for you. The further
you get your
adventures
motorbike, David, and do a motorbike race with him. Oh, that's pretty exciting. You've
So
got a
thank
new book
you.
on the horizon then, so you can
Yeah,
look forward to that.
Yeah, I hope if I ever finish it. So I hope it happens. Yeah, I'm near the end of a first draft, so that's, that is a good achievement, I think. But I'm looking forward to getting a lot more time at this, and soon. So when teaching settles, when the term is over. So it's also set in the
so good
States.
luck. Yeah, we look forward to that. Yes, thank you.
That's thank you so much, Una, for answering all of our
Thank you, Una.
questions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's us, isn't it?
Thanks so much for being so kind.
If we we want to make sure and leave time for if anybody else has anything I'm sure there are questions loading up for Lou to ask Una.
Yeah, so I think it's that over to Lou, is it? That's
Thanks, guys. Una, it's actually just a shower of love that you're going to get from the comments. So prepare to bathe yourself. It's just everybody. This Audrey Robinson says the sense of place is so strong. Jessamine wants to read it again. Anne actually had asked about if there was any plans for a sequel, so that's definitely in demand for when you do come out of the world of the book that you're writing at the moment. And actually, in relation to that, you said, I think at the start, that you allowed the book to come through, or that you found it as you wrote it. Could you speak a little bit to that, because it's really fascinating, that process? Because I always imagine that you'd have to have a very highly structured idea beforehand or whatever, but you sounded like you were just letting it flow.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's writers like in the audience that will be like horrified and that like that's not how it's done, but like for me, that definitely was the process. And I did feel like times where the story took over or a character did things, and they did it because it was authentic for them to do that. And I loved that happening. And I loved when like the copy editor wrote me a note in the margin to say, I just don't think Wilson would have said this. It's like, like knowing Wilson, he wouldn't have said. I was like, that's incredible to me. Like that she knows Wilson, and that. But I think that letting characters and letting events unfold does open you to possibility and to. I think when Louise was talking on her book launch with Sligo Central Library, she talked about joy. What crack is it if you already know what's going to happen? Where's the joy? Like if you already have it all plotted. And I agree with that. I think there's something about leaving yourself open. And I don't want to sound completely hippie about it, but there are times where something else takes over. Like where you're just writing, you're like, where did that come from? And then you read all these writers that talk about like, the unconscious taking over. And I do think that there is an element of that in the writing process where something happens that you're not completely cognizant of. And I mean, I think later when you're editing, you're totally present and, alert. But I think there are times something else happens.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Actually, Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, she talks about this idea of almost like the idea is going past overhead, and you put your hand up and you pull it down. You might be the one that brought it through, or somebody else might be the one that brought it through. And she actually had a book plotted out and didn't write it. And another author, a friend, ended up writing a book that was almost identically the same, another famous author. So it is interesting how that works. Judy S., when you were talking about Valley Forge Mountain, she commented that I walked on Valley Forge Mountain yesterday evening with two Irish friends here. We talked about the book, how wonderfully it describes this amazing place and how lucky we are to have it on our doorstep.
That's someone from Ireland who lives in that area now. Say hi to her.
And Eames asks, what are the main 2 to 3 key insights you got from your writing retreat, and what did you learn in the 4th session that you'd apply to the 1st in retrospect? So he's asking, like, what are the main insights you got from the writing retreat, and then, you know, towards the end, if you could have applied what you'd learned by the end to the start, what would you apply?
I think initially the writing retreat actually gave me something about, I mean, at a personal level, being able to just ring fence myself from any responsibility, to be able to say, I actually can't do that right now because I'm focusing on this thing that's really important to me. And I think for a lot of people, that's hard sometimes to really be protective of the writing. And I think going on a retreat did that. And also that writing could sometimes just happen, and that you could be prolific, and that it didn't always have to be like tearing your hair out, you know. And I think being on retreat, that happened, that there was just more flow, that I was able to get to flow faster because I was in it and I wasn't stepping out and busy with other thoughts. And I think by the 4th time I went, I had faith in the writing process. I had faith that if you sit at the desk, something will happen. And I don't think I had that at the very start. And that, I think it's invaluable, you know, because it had to do with confidence and self-belief and trust in the process and all of that. So I think that's what I learned about myself, and about writing, through the retreats. I couldn't say enough about it. And I'm really grateful to the River Mill. They also made very good food. And, you know, you're in boot camp, everybody in the house, there's only 5 rooms and everybody's in the same place working. And there's something about that as well, where, you know, there's other people behind their doors working away. And not that it's competitive, but you feel kind of an obligation. And also, if, like, in my family, I've left my family to do this and everything's on my husband, like all the driving, and I don't want to waste it. I don't want to not take advantage of every minute of it. You know, so there's like excitement, or, you know, and an energy around it.
Yeah. And I think you couldn't skip, I don't think, knowing what you knew on the 4th trip, it's a thing builds on itself. You know, you needed to go through the steps to get to that faith. So there is that leaning into that fear of, I don't know if I can do it. And then you just grow in confidence as you go along. Mary McGuckin asks, Una, can you talk about the symbolism of the crooked tree and the kingdom?
Yeah, so so many people told me that they had a kingdom. A lot of people told me that they had a place called a kingdom. So the kingdom is this place. It's a fort, you know, that I guess we all had forts, and it's a fort that Libby, the narrator, has with her best friend, and it is a place of escape, and for them to be, you know, away from the world. And by the time the book, the now time of the book, I think Sage has kind of outgrown the kingdom. She's doing other stuff, and for Libby, it's a place to escape to when she feels kind of abandoned by the world. But along the path, along the horseshoe trail on the way to the kingdom, this place, this little world that's created through laurel and rhododendron, there's a tree that, you know, that grows up straight and then makes a right degree angle for about a few feet and then goes up again. And it's a very distinct marker on the trail. And the basically there's 2 possibilities, you know, about why a tree would be like that. And one of them is just that a bigger tree fell on it when it was young, and it rotted away the bigger tree, and so the little tree took its path again, but it's misshapen by the blow or by the experience. And I thought, like, metaphorically, that's a lot of what the book is about. It's these kind of what children experience and how it shapes them, and their resilience, I guess, as well. And then also, but there's also the Native Americans would often use it as like wayfinders. They would bend trees in a particular way in their sapling time, so that they could signal to others about where there was good hunting ground or good sleeping, good places to shelter, and so that they were wayfinders. So it kind of works in both ways. But at the end of the book, I think Libby sort of sees it almost in symbolic of her of life and her experience, and maybe resilience. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Mary.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous question. I suppose in some ways we're all waymarkers for each other with the lessons that we carry from our teenage years, and the teachings then that we give to others because of that. And I think in the book you've managed to channel a lot of that that spirit of being a teenager, and it's some of the warmest response that's coming back for it. So congratulations on that. And I wish I could ask all of the other questions and read out everything else, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So it's time now to go to a little bit of music. But before we do, just ask, did anybody want to say anything else? Una, did you have anything else to add, or Lauren or David?
So I just want to thank everyone who's here tonight. Like, thank you. Like, I can't see the audience, and I just want to say thank you so much, and to David and Lauren for such a great interview, and Lou, thank you for facilitating. I'm really grateful to everyone. Thank you, and to Irene and Michael.
Thank you.
The music.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Lou.
so we have a gorgeous piece of music now, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and after that we'll come back to our open mic participants. So please enjoy, and thanks everyone.
Just before we start our last song, I'd just like to say a few words. I want to say thanks so much to Una for asking me to perform. Thanks a million to Michael Holmes for accompanying me. It was absolutely beautiful. And thank you to Sligo Central Library and to Lou for hosting and helping to organise the event.
Right.
So they say
so gorgeous. If you could see us all smiling and nodding and bopping along here backstage. Fabulous work, Irene. Thank you so much. So now we're on to our open mic. So open mic, folks, have your mics ready and your cameras ready. The first person we're going to, if we can find her, and sometimes it takes a wee second for the studio Rove lads to grab people from the names list, but we have Hazel O'Grady first, if Hazel is ready. And actually, I'll read out the order. Oh no, there's Hazel. Go for it.
There you go. I have two short poems here. Just find it now.
I wanna know.
Yeah. So just the title that's on it is Youth Song for the minute, but it's not definite. Youth sings its song of a world with no wrong. Exploding joy rings in each note, and on it goes. They swept away in its curling wave. Rise the joy more. Peak, feel euphoria. Fall sharp descent, crashing with mad intent. Youth now lies, staring at blue skies. Water covers their weakened form. Drowned their song, no longer strong. Last note, a sharp whistle. They bristle, as it rings in youth's ear, the last note they will ever hear. So that's number one. Yeah, there's number two. This one is called White Dress. I saw you on the riverbank on the forest edge. You wore a white dress, flowed in the wind like the river. I walked closer, never took my eyes away. You didn't speak, but I know you saw me. I searched for that white dress, watched for its flowing fabric each day I lived. A mischievous smirk just for me. Your gaze met mine. A whirlpool swirled in your eyes. It swallowed me whole. I searched for that white dress, watched for its flowing fabric each day I lived. I saw you in the green fields, on the town's bridge, in my garden, in my bedroom. I searched for that white dress, watched for its flowing fabric each day I lived. You found your way into my dreams. By the riverbank you stood, hand in the river, sun beaming on you, and I awaken only to lose you again. I searched for that white dress, watched for its flowing fabric each day I lived. I stand at the riverbank by the forest edge, stand where you stood, hoping one day I'd see you waiting for me. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Hazel. Beautiful, clear, strong imagery. Really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And next we have Celine Kilcoyne, if Celine is ready.
Yes, this is Sailing Kilcoyne. The first poem, the poem I'm going to read is Landlady. Like a sparrow, her spindly legs, not travelled far, but writely free, moves freely forward, freely free. She's the landlady, now as free as the bird, which sings the song of freedom as she strolls forever forward. Fresh air skims her face, unlike how orders were placed. Her joy is pleasant as a charm of birds, like a childhood toy springs on her soul, second childhood like spring to her soul. Once the oak oppressed her, now the bar is set higher, just as the birds is set higher, just as the birds who travel beside her. Her freedom tastes freedom as freedom. She sings it in her soul, feeling freely free.
It's beautiful. Thanks, Celine. We're all clapping in the background here. That was really gorgeous. Thank you. It's good to see you again as well.
Thank you.
And next we have Jessamine O'Connor. Welcome, Jess.
Hi. Hi. So really, I kind of signed up for this because Una was on, and today we, as students in the IT in her writing and literature program. I had her last ever class with Una, which was really sad. And so, over the last 3 years, she's been like tutor, lecturer, head of department, just all around inspiration, legend. We're all really missing her already. So I signed up to read something tonight without having anything to read. So I wrote this, and it's really lowering the tone. But, hey. Jam sandwich. I suggest a jam sandwich as I bring out the drinks. I'm greeted with a hasty laugh, the trace of a shudder. It's good to have in-jokes when you're in a long-termer. Or are we both lifers now? Is this house arrest or solitary confinement? Anyway, the offer's declined, as expected. I stand and say, don't knock it till you try it. Swallow down my whiskey, ho. Theirs stays warming in their hand.
Thank you, Jess. Sorry, I hate the Zoom lack of clapping because I can see the round of applause in the background. Yeah, house arrest. Yeah, we're all fairly familiar with that sensation at this point. Thank you, Jess. So next we have Maeve McCormick. Maeve, if you're ready there.
Hey, how are you doing? I'm just going to read a bit of prose. I'm going to do just sections of a piece. I'll run them all into one. Grief scores at 26.2. When will the finish line come? I remember when my friend entered the Dublin City Marathon. I offered to train with her up to 10 miles. Each Saturday was like being in a pub at last orders. Sure, we'll have the one we came in for. We'll do a few more miles. The pretend training runs clocked up to 20 miles. Finally, I succumbed and decided to enter myself. I acquired a race number in someone else's name. My parents were dead and I had no siblings living in Ireland. In a closing, triumphant pilgrimage, I would run the streets of Dublin and declare acceptance that my life there was gone forever. I was going to run this grief out of my system, and that would be that. Sadness, relief, anger, frustration, and nostalgia would be run out of me by the finish. It sounded great in my head, even if I was not sure what I meant. Anyway, I had thousands of people cheering me on. Marathon day arrives. I bury thoughts of the finish and focus on the start. There are 22,000 competitors at the starting line this sunny October weekend. I wonder how many of them are happy, how many are sad. Each runner has a colour-coded number. We embark in waves according to our colour, our heads feeding smiling, excited faces. We are off. I speculate on how many are sad inside from a bereavement. Sadness is a grey cloud hovering over the thousands of runners. It is the sweat running off our bodies. It is the sweat that is stuck to our bodies. It is in the heads hanging with loneliness. It is in the heads that start out on strong smiles, but with quavering thoughts inside. Thoughts that they shield from others. I can't believe I'm running by the iconic St. Stephen's Green as part of the Dublin City Marathon. Sarsfield, Inchicore, Kilmainham. I told my friend all about these old hubs on our long Saturday runs. Today's memories feel barren without her to relive them with. Why did I leave her behind? Even though I'm a chocolate person, I gorge on jellies touted at me by spectators, hoping to feel comforted. I spit them out and look at the mess, disgusted at my littering. I give dirty looks to everyone else, making such waste of mini water bottles, plastic cups, and squeezed out gel packs along Bird Avenue. The flow of clothes to be recycled has changed to a stream of rubbish to be dumped. Now I'm running the wrong way up the one-way Inchicore Road. It's one way for traffic, but there is none. All these roads are closed. Everyone else is running the same direction as me, but I feel as though I'm running on my own against the flow. What is pushing me on? I'm afraid to stop. I may not start again. Keep going, don't think, avoid thoughts. Go, go, go. Among thousands, I run alone. I face the long Crumlin Road, a straight avenue of bodies leaking up a grey city hill banked by drab houses. This is not how I imagined it. Without my friend, I'm starkly alone on this journey we jointly started 9 months ago. Mile 25. Step by step, I rely on muscle memory. My head and body are no longer part of my legs. These legs have one cadence only. I would be quicker walking. but I will not walk. I tell my friend to go ahead. She listens to my pleads and keeps going. I know, like me, she has her final pace and that cannot change. A less honest friend would have stayed. She goes ahead, and I take my final marathon wave. No smiling crowds, just me and my head, begging for the impossible that someone will call out my name. I know I'll succeed, even if this is not how I planned to cross the finish line, alone. But I will cross it. With grief, there is no success or failure. It absorbs you, lets you go, and drags you back whenever it wants. I won't fight anymore, but I will keep going. People sympathize with you when someone dies. Attending a funeral is the completion of mourner's role. The journey of the bereaved is untried, unknown, maybe never complete. Grief is a slow death fighting to turn into a different life, not yet ready to reach the finish. I wonder if I will ever cross my grief finish line. Time or winning doesn't matter. I try to convince myself. Mile 26.2, a final miraculous sprint.
Stop, Maeve. That was too good. That was beautiful. You got lots of lovely comments as well. And yes, somebody mentioned that the pacing of the reading matched the pacing of the stories. Really beautifully well done. Thank you so much. Next we have, if you're ready, Maeve Callahan. I'll give you a second to get yourself and your camera on. Hey Maeve,
Hi,
welcome.
everyone. Hi. So this is a poem called Buddy and the Bees. The air is alive, breathing, with the insectical buzz of the many busy bumblebees and other winged beasties. He stands stock still, gazing, his nose in amongst the flowers, as if he was merely savouring the splendid scent. But no, at the top of his snout are watchful eyes, waiting for the opportunity to strike. Whacking the flowers with a paw, a bee tumbles to the paved path. It crawls around, not knowing its fate. The snap of a jaw shaketh the head. The creature spat out again and scuttles drowsily. After being struck a few more times, it stills, dead. Its attacker doesn't understand. Why has its companion stopped playing the game? He bows into downward dog and barks boisterously. When the bee fails to respond, he gives up, returns to the flowers with the abundance of other insects, and begins again his meditation. Thank you.
Oh, that was so beautiful, Maeve. Thank you. So vivid, so full of dog energy. I feel like wagging my tail. That was gorgeous. Thank you so much. And our last open mic person of the night is Colin Lawler. Are you there, Colin? Come through.
I am. 1 second. There we go. I did have a particular thing I was going to read, but then I decided, no, I'll read the sad one instead. Because I've read enough. I keep writing things about my granny, and I keep reading them with the word, and I should read something different for once. So this is a very short story inspired by the song Nautical Disaster by the Tragically Hip. I had a dream about a nautical disaster. I thought it would be just be a one-time thing. One always assumes that about dreams, but now I have it every single night. In the dream, I'm on a ship. No, that's not right. I'm not a person in this dream. I'm a viewpoint. I am the sea, or perhaps I am the ship. The ship sinks. It always sinks. I do not know why. I see people milling about on the deck, scrambling to survive, not knowing how. They're confused. They're going to die. People throw things overboard, trying desperately to stay afloat. Women and children pile onto lifeboats while men hurriedly direct them. Possessions are lost to the waves. Toys drift among the wreckage and the bloated corpses of the drowned. The survivors navigate through them on their tiny vessels, but if you ask them, I'm sure they would not count themselves among the living. There's almost no sign that there was any ship there to begin with. People living and dead drift away. Then the dream ends. I don't know if this was a real incident. I don't know if there were any real survivors. I don't know the name of the ship or where it sank, but it sinks behind my eyelids over and over again. These doomed mariners haunt my dreams. I cannot go on like this. I see them every night when I go to sleep. And when I'm awake, I can still hear their screams in my head and their fingernails scratching at my hull.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Colin. I love that observation about not being a person, but more a viewpoint. It's really fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. We've reached the end of the evening. So thank you to Una, to Lauren, to David, to Irene for the amazing music, and to Una's husband. Thank you to all my colleagues in Sligo Library who helped me to do this tonight and listen to all the whinging and moaning and stuff that goes on in the background. So thank you, everyone. And thank you so much to our lovely audience for all of your wonderful comments in the chat. It's great to have you here with us. Thank you so much. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and all of the other social medias to keep up to date with what we're doing next. Next month for The Word, we have Lucy Caldwell interviewed by Keith Hopper on the 26th of May. So we very much look forward to seeing you there. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and night night from Sligo Library. Bye.